Hello, BookTube. I have a tag for you today. It's an original tag. It's from Brandon's Bookshelf, and it's his very first original tag. It's the Philosophy of Reading tag. And it comes preceded today by a very large number of emails from all of you. I leave my email on every video. You are welcome to email me about anything at all, anything that you're thinking of at the moment. Most of the emails that I get are about BookTube, but I get them about everything else as well, from problem relative that you need just a sympathetic ear, to innumerable dog questions. And I've had quite a few emails about the new BookTube channel, Brandon's Bookshelf. People saying, have you seen it? What do you think of his channel? Have you watched this video or that video? I have. Brandon's Bookshelf came to my attention a while ago, and I watched all of his videos, watched a few of them several times now. The note that cropped up most often in your emails to me was something along the lines of, boiled down to, I really like his channel. I hope you do too, even though he reads lots of Dude Bro stuff. And you certainly didn't need to tell me that, since he has a big, fat copy of Infinite Jest proudly displayed right there on the shelf over his shoulder. It's impossible to miss. And it's true. He does read a lot of Dude Bro Lit. But it's possible that he could be saved. He may not be too far down that dark, dark path. Maybe the Bean and I should go to the house of him and his lovely wife and his children. Maybe over Hanukkah or Christmas. I could wean him off his David Foster Wallace habit. Although in this particular video, he's a very smart, well-spoken guy and also generous. And in this video, he is hosting a giveaway. If you do his video, I think within a week, then you are eligible for a giveaway of the new annotated Meditations of Marcus Aurelius. Of course, the book is not a surprise if you know that someone is a Dude Bro reader. But it's the new annotated edition translated by Robin Waterfield. It's terrific, absolutely terrific. I want to stress, I don't think that Brandon is watching this video, but I'm hoping that I don't qualify for that giveaway because A, it's ridiculous to send new books to me, and B, as you saw in an earlier mail haul on this channel, the publisher sent that to me quite some time ago. I was impressed by it, though. So one of you that does get it is definitely going to like it, I think. And the Philosophy of Reading tag has 20 questions, and they are fantastic questions. But lurking over them is that word right there in the title. This was another thing that a number of you emailed me about, saying, I really like his channel, but he loves philosophy, so go easy on him. I will do my best to be diplomatic, kind, and sweet, as I always am. So we're gonna try and get through these 20 questions, because they're fascinating. It's a fantastic tag, just in general, but to be his first tag, it's the kind of questions that I certainly want to hear all of your answers to, so I'm hoping it goes viral. Plus, it's also a lot of fun when a new channel has their first tag go viral. That's usually a lot of fun. And Brandon's channel is terrific. Absolutely terrific. Totally genuine, heartfelt, intelligent in the way that he tackles the books that he reads. I myself might a little bit regret his tendency towards Dude Bro Lit, if only because a good solid 60 to 80% of the best books that have ever been written were written by, what's the word again? Women. They will not be anywhere in the Dude Bro ambit. But there's time. He's young yet. So let's just get to the questions here and see what kind of trouble we can get into. Number one is, what's most important? A good character, plot, or message? And here we run into trouble right away in Brandon's own answer, because he comes down, unsurprisingly, if he has a tendency for Dude Bro Lit, in favor of message. He likes plot and character, but message. And of course, that idea just makes me curl my lip. I am perfectly willing to engage with an author, but I am totally unwilling to sit there as a grateful supplicant, taking the downdrafts from the snowy peaks of your mountain of wisdom. Absolutely not. If you're going to give me a message, label whatever it is you're doing as church literature and leave it at that. But don't try to smuggle a message into me in your dumb novel. I would say either plot or character over message. in the minute that I am reading something, I mean, I'm assuming if we're talking plot and character here, we're probably talking about fiction. Although Brandon seems to read mostly nonfiction. But if I'm reading a book, actually, it doesn't matter either way. If I'm reading a book and I start to get the idea that the author is trying to enlighten me, trying to give me some sort of ladder up from my benighted present state to something closer to his level of wisdom, I want to slam the book shut and use it to perform a blunt but very satisfying medical operation upon the author. So I'm going to say either plot or character. Question number 2 is, should one read books about ideas or opinions they disagree with? Absolutely. Absolutely. Number 3 is, as tech advances, what do you think will be the role of books? I can't help but notice the smuggled in implication of this question, which is that ebooks aren't books. Because as tech advances, books will be left behind, but they won't be. They won't be, right? EPUB is a wide open source. It's a wide open formatting of a book. It's entirely likely that no matter how much tech changes in the next 10 or even 20 years, EPUBs will still be readable. And if not, there will be a million conversion sites. Probably the new software that you get in 2030 will automatically convert older software. Everybody's worried about that. Everybody who uses any kind of documentation on their computer is worried that 5 computers from now, they won't be able to read it anymore. And everybody, all computer developers, software providers and all that, book providers, they all know that. And so ebooks aren't going anywhere. Ebooks will only proliferate more. So in that sense, the role of books won't change much. I think that the role of books will change, if anything, not because of tech, but because of society. Tech has been advancing for 20 years. I think if anything's going to endanger the role of books, which I think is the subtext here, that books will be endangered by the rise of tech. If anything's going to endanger the role of books, it's not going to be tech. It's going to be the lack of the reading virus. It's going to be stupid educational boards. It's going to be stupid schools. It's going to be stupid teachers who get their students at just the right age, just exactly the right age, between 12 and 15, and give them okay, class, this is going to be an hour of screen time. Use it wisely. See ya. You do stuff like that, or you eviscerate the reading canon, assign reading canon in favor of the latest hot topic, current year, blue checkmark political box checking. You do something like that, you are stripping those students of their literary patrimony. You're giving them an extremely impoverished future, which will have no incentive for them to read. So yeah, if anything, it'll be social factors. The rise of tech, I don't think will hurt books at all. It might end up helping them. I'm surprised that hasn't happened more often. There are all kinds of places online where you can go right now to get free books. Or dirt cheap books, the way ebooks should be. And I can't help but think that those sites will only increase as book prices continue to increase, printed book prices continue to increase. So I would have to hope it anyway. It has never been a better time if you're talking books as the works themselves, regardless of their format. Well, 50 years ago, if you were, I don't even know, let's say a 15-year-old, and you were curious, on the doorstep of literature, on the doorstep of maybe having reading as an active part of your whole life. 50 years ago, if you were a teenager and that was the case, and you lived in, rural Nebraska or wherever, what was the likelihood that you would be able to read Barnaby Rudge by Charles Dickens? O Pioneers by Willa Cather? Age of Innocence? What was the likelihood that you'd be able to do that? Well, first of all, you work and you go to school all day and all night, and then where's the nearest bookstore? It's probably 100 miles away, and you can't drive yet. And even if you could, there's only farm vehicles. You don't have a car just of your own to go and do what you want with. And even if you did, you wouldn't get permission to go 100 miles to a bookstore. No one would believe that's what you were doing. So other than that, what are your choices? Well, it's possible that up in the attic in a wooden chest there might be an illustrated comic book classic of the Iliad or something like that. In 2021, that same kid at 15 in that same backwater in rural Nebraska can download from Project Gutenberg for free, from the privacy of their own bedroom, virtually the whole of the Western canon. That's incredible. That it's to call that an improvement over earlier years because of the rise of tech is a massive understatement. That's the whole world. That plenty of young people, when they were that age in locations like that, badly dreamed about, and there was no chance of it, none at all. Now it's easy to do. The question is going to be the like the earlier question. The question is going to be not so much the availability as the will. Have these young people been taught that books and reading are good, are interesting, are worthwhile? Uh, but let's see here. Question number 4 is how important are summaries, reviews, and art in your book choosing? And here there are two kinds of answers, two tiers of answers, as it were. For you, nothing is more important than the Steve review of that book. Nothing comes before that. Obviously, that's not going to be true for me because I am Steve. But for you, your very first question when you are browsing in a bookstore and you see a book you've never heard of and you flip it over and you read the back and you think this sounds interesting, your very first question should be, has Steve reviewed this book? And if so, what did he think? Because my reviews are written for you. They're not written for my fellow critics. They're not written for the publishing industry. They're not written for the future. I'm not good enough to write for the future. They're written for you. So what you should do right there in the bookstore is simply call up see if I wrote a review of that book. Just go to Google and type in my first name, my last name, and the name of the book. That ought to do it. That usually does it. That's how I do it. That's how I look to see whether or not I've reviewed something and where. For me, the question is usually where did I review it? But for you, that should be the determining factor beyond all doubt. I myself think that for American editions of books, since they're all bought ugly anyway, they all ought to have just my face on the cover. But for me, since I am Steve, I don't have to consult Steve's reviews. For me, it's not so much the summary of the book, because I know a lot of the people who write that stuff, and they haven't read the book. They're going off notes provided by an author. They're publicists who are often not all that familiar with the subject, or especially the publishing provenance on the subject. So they'll get a new book about the Albigensian Crusade, and they'll be supplied with some patter and some facts and maybe a couple of lines from the author. But they themselves will know nothing about the Albigensian Crusade and will especially know nothing about the last 10 books written on it. It's the kind of subject where a person is more likely to pick up the book if they do know about the subject, in which case they're going to want an informed back cover copy. And they often won't get that. So it's not that at all. For me, it's a description of the book. What is it exactly? Does it fit? Does it zero in on something, regardless of how somebody who may or may not be familiar with its contents is going to summarize those contents? What is it exactly? That will usually help me, especially with nonfiction. That will help me immensely. If I encounter a new book on I don't even know, the British monarchy, let's say. And let's say I do the equivalent of flipping it over to read the back cover, and the back cover is full of sweeping generalizations. It starts with William the Conqueror and goes all the way to Queen Elizabeth, and talks about mistresses, if mistresses come up, if quirky details, so-and-so like carrots or whatnot, Alfred and the cakes, that sort of thing. That's going to tell me one thing about whether or not I want to prioritize the reading of that book. I mean, let's be honest, I'm probably going to read it anyway, but whether I want to prioritize the reading, that will tell me one thing. Whereas, if I flip over the book, a book on the British monarchy, and the whole back cover is about how King Charles I decided to do away with Parliament because they weren't doing what he wanted and rule without them, and it goes into granular detail, well, then that description tells me all I need to know. I don't need a summary of the author's points or the author's ransacked sources or anything like that. That description will tell me all I need to know about getting the book. Question number 5 is, should one ever skim or scan a book? Well, it's a free country, you can skim or scan a book to your heart's content. That doesn't bother me so much. The action doesn't bother me so much as does the incredibly popular corollary, even on BookTube, in fact, especially on BookTube, which is to skim or scan a book and then say you read it. which is a lie. As I've mentioned on this channel, lying is bad, so you shouldn't do it. And yet, there are a great many big, influential booktube channels. In fact, in the last 2 weeks, I've learned there are far more of them than I thought, where the host of that show, the MC of that show, who doesn't care about you, would call a lawyer if you approach them on the street, wants your money, basically wants lots and lots of your money, where that MC doesn't read at all. They use short form or Blinkist. They read all sorts of Amazon reviews, but they have an absolute horror of the idea of sitting down and actually reading a book from front to back. You can skim or scan a book to your heart's content, but you have not read it if you've done that. And if you claim that you have, that's bad. I'm not saying that. I mean, Brandon is simply asking the question, and that's my answer. It's going to come up again as well. Number 6 is, should reading always be enjoyable? I'm not sure that I know what's meant here. Unless you're talking tedium. If you're talking outrage, I think naturally I would, considering that I'm 100% Irish Catholic. I think that there's a tremendous amount of enjoyment in a book that infuriates you. I don't have to be, humming the soundtrack to The Sound of Music to be loving what I'm reading. It could be driving me nuts. I could still be loving it. For me, the non-enjoyable part that is a deal breaker is tedium. If a book is tedious, well, if a book isn't tedious, then I think it's enjoyable, whether you agree with the author or not. But if it's tedious, that's a deal breaker. Unless you're contractually obliged to endure it. And that's going to come up again later as well. Question number 7 is it important to be well-read? This came up a long time ago, years and years ago, when I was doing the Western Canon starter kit. This came up. The idea of being well-read, the idea of being widely read, and how important it is. And I stressed then what I want to stress now, which is that there's no wrong way to read. If you really, really, really love dystopian YA novels, and you don't really feel like reading anything else, then go ahead and read them and enjoy them. Enjoy the heck out of them. That's absolutely fine. That's fantastic. The obverse of that, the thing that used to be portrayed as a social good, as an intellectual, personal good, was to be widely read or to be well read, to have read the canonical classics, to have read a little history, a little science, a little biography, a little all of that. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. Absolutely fine. The only thing, again, I'm not blaming anyone on our little corner booktube, but the only thing that bothers me is when people read that way. I read exclusively contemporary YA. YA by authors who aren't heterosexual and who aren't any more than 4 years older than I am myself. Okay, that's a weird, almost necrotic concentration, but if you want to do that, that's just fine. What bothers me is when you put on airs for doing that. You are an extremely, unbelievably cloistered reader. You should acknowledge that. You have to acknowledge that. If that's the only thing that you ever read, it's the only thing you know anything about, then you're not well read. You might be an enthusiastic reader, but you're a fairly ignorant one. Not even fairly, you're a vastly ignorant one. The whole world of literature you know nothing about and don't want to know anything about. Now, the don't want to know anything about is fine, I guess. I would feel sorry for you, and I would tell you that to your face. But there's no wrong way to do this. If you're enjoying yourself, that's fine. But it's the moral prescriptiveness, it's the snootiness of these most cloistered of all cloistered readers, the people who just mind one little strain. They're always the snootiest people, probably out of defensiveness, and it drives me nuts. Just drives me nuts when I encounter something like that, where it's, well, you be better. Okay, have you ever read a work of history? No? Oh, okay. Have you ever read a biography? No? Ever read a work in translation? No? Ever read any adult fiction? Even though you're pushing 30? No? Huh. Okay. So I would say it's important to be well read, but I wouldn't say it in a prescriptive way. Then question number 8 is, what is your book buying process? Of course, the joke here is that I back a U-Haul up to the Brattle sale lot here in Boston. The Brattle bookshop here in Boston has a sale lot of cheap books, and I go there all the time. I didn't go there this week because I've been away. I've been out of the state. But even there, the process is if, like for instance, at the Brattle, the books are dirt cheap. They're $1 or $3. So money is not an object. And when money is not an object, then the things that shape my book buying process are entirely other. They are, for instance, in these post-COVID days when I don't have muscular teenagers to do my loading and bearing, I have to carry my stuff myself. So I don't want to get too many books because I'll be lugging them and I don't want to. So I have to how much I can comfortably carry is one delimiting factor. But other than that, if a book is $1 and I see it and I think, well, I've read it, I remember it, but I haven't reread it in a while and I might like to do that, no, I'll grab it. Absolutely. If the books are $1 or 75 cents or 5 cents or 50 cents in Vermont, then I will just scoop in anything that looks interesting. In retail bookstores, oh my, they are, I can imagine for the rest of you, probably torture. I have a lifetime discount at Barnes & Noble, one big retail bookstore chain here in the United States, and it's a hefty discount. So it's not quite so bad for me. Books are still eye-wateringly expensive, but if I go into a Barnes & Noble and I see something I want, I can buy it without thinking that I'm bankrupting the Imperial Treasury. I actually ran into that while I was up in Vermont because the area where I was, we didn't have any Barnes & Nobles, but we did have a Books A Million, a great bookstore, Books A Million, a retail bookstore that had tons and tons of remainders that were individual to that store, and also shelf after shelf after shelf of new books. And I saw a couple that I really wanted. I had to restrain myself from buying them at full price because I wouldn't get a discount at Books A Million. But my book buying process is predicated on the books being cheap. Because there's no other justification for it. Not when you're getting a pile of books in the mail every week from publishers. I don't technically need to buy any books at all and still be supplied with an endless supply of things that I am actually interested in reading. So the books have to be cheap, and then once they're cheap, it's solely a matter of how the whimsy strikes me. Then question number 9 is, what is your reading process? And the first thing that came to mind is Tina Turner saying "Welcome to Thunderdome." The first phrase that came to my mind, because my reading process is pretty brutal. I grapple with a book. I grapple with it. Reading absorbs me completely. I can't do it courteously. I can't pay attention to you and also read. Once I start reading, I've had people sit right next to me. I've had cars run into each other right in front of me. I don't notice. The only thing that will pull me out of a book is whatever dog happens to be nearby. That will do it. But otherwise, I've had friends that literally have to do this to get my attention. And that absorption is very much participatory. It's almost combat. A book, any book, is demanding your attention. Even if they're not demanding your money, they're demanding your attention and your time. And quite a few of them are demanding your money as well. If you pay $1 for a book, that's maybe not so strong. But a lot of you buy your books retail. And that's a huge amount of money. A book is asking a lot of you and of me. So I don't view them neutrally. I don't belly up to a book saying, "Oh, hi, my new friend." No, not at all. I grapple with them. I wrestle with them. I try to pin them down. I try to dismiss them. I try to shove them out the nearest door or window. I'm working with them all the time. What twists or turn is the author taking here? Marginalizing furiously, remembering 100,000 books. What does the author not know here that they should know? What do they know that I didn't know? All that sort of thing. Grappling and arguing and fighting. It's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. It's Thunderdome. So it's not a peaceful process at all, but I wouldn't change it for anything. Then question number 10 is, how do you use what you read? That's a classic Brendan question here. Part of how I use what I read is as a magical philosopher's stone in which I transmute them into money. Because a great deal of what I read, I'm paid to read. So that's one very, very pragmatic, real world way in which I use what I read. I use it as my living, as my means of feeding the being. Other than that, the ways that I use what I read are to get better at reading. The non-monetary ways is to get better at reading. Every book, I would like to think, even the really crappy ones, make me a little bit better at reading the next book, at preparing me for the next book, no matter what it is. Because authors are infinite in their bag of tricks. They're infinite in their eccentricities. So every book gives me a little bit more to go on, so to speak, for the next book. Question number 11 is, if you could download a book to your brain, would you still read a printed book? And here I'm going to be generous and say that Brandon would also include reading an ebook. I've read a huge amount of ebooks in the last week. I don't like having them sidelined as not real. I read and annotated them and grappled with them and loved them. So they are books. They are absolutely real. And I think that I would always value that intermediary, the fact that there's an intermediary step. I don't think I'd want it downloaded straight into my brain. I like the intermediary step. I like the fact that you can leave it, and also that you can serendipitously encounter it. And if you could download it straight from some sort of brain net, that element would either be very much weakened or gone, or changed beyond recognition. I don't think I would like that. I like the encounter. So I think I would always like the process of the intermediary process of taking that information and filtering it through my own reading self, as opposed to just having it planted directly. Question number 12 is, what are your views on rereading a book? And I love it. Absolutely love it. I'm a little bit more primed to say how much I love it now than I would have been 2 weeks ago, because I just spent a week as a guest up in Vermont. And I got a lot of books when I was up there, but they were all books that I've had before. I had some new books with me on the iPad, but I did a huge amount of rereading. It was just a natural thing. In fact, I wrote a column about it. It's just a natural thing to do when you're a guest in a very, very bookish house, is just to reread, just to have the house select things for you. But I love it. I absolutely love it. You change as a reader. I just mentioned that every book primes me for the next book, gives me more of a store of reading experience, but it also hones me for the last book as well. I am just a better reader after every book, which means that if I go back to the Deerslayer or the Art of War or whatever, I'm going to bring more to it than I had the first time, or the second time, or the 10th time. If I'm doing it right, I'm going to bring more to the book. So that's another reason why I absolutely love rereading. The only problem that I have with rereading is that it sometimes migrates from one part of the brain to another. If you're just looking for a hit from your rereading, that's bad. I still indulge in it, but it's bad. There isn't any, as I often say on this channel, there isn't any actual defensible reason why I should ever read a Sherlock Holmes story again. Why I should ever read any of the Jungle Books of Rudyard Kipling again. There isn't any justifiable reason why I should do that, and yet I do. I know them word for word. There's no reason for me to reread them. And I think I've already gained from them every bit of nuance that I can get by being a better reader. You have to be worried. I always have to be watchful of that. You always have to be watchful of whether or not it's just a drug hit, because those are bad. That's not something that you should do with reading, Steve says, as he squints at the ranks of Dewberry readers who use reading for only that. Anyway, question number 13 is, what makes a book good? Because Brandon is a masochist who wants to torment us all. What makes a book good? And I have it on the iPad here. I tried to distill this, but this is also a whole column that I could write on the subject. I want to ask 3 questions of a book to determine whether or not it's good. Number 1, and most importantly, is it sincere? Does the author mean it? And is the author telling me it directly, without insult, without insulting me? Sincerity doesn't do me any good if it comes at the end of a spear tip of insult or condescension. Then I want to know, is it interesting? It can be sincere and still be boring. I know that for a fact. But is it both sincere and interesting? And then after those two, is it technically well executed? I'm not a pedant, so I'm not going to hold imperfect technical execution against a book that is sincere and is interesting. If it's got those first two, I'm willing to allow quite a bit for the third. And the next question, you can see it coming, is what makes a book bad? And it's the obverse of what makes it good. The number 1 thing being, is it insulting? Is the author insulting me? Is the author condescending to me just out in the open because they think they're better than I am? If that's true, there's nothing that will save the book. There's nothing that infuriates me more. There's nothing that more guarantees a Steve stomping his feet in blood review, as a friend of mine puts it, than if an author cops an attitude like that with me. You're a tale teller. You're a hired song singer. You have no place being condescending to me, none whatsoever. So if you're going to write an 1,100-page book called Infinite Jest and just throw in anything that you effing feel like writing about, and an editor tells you, okay, well, this doesn't really belong here, and it goes on for 500 pages, well, you'll just bury them in explanations. Send them a 15-screen email. Show up at their house, talk to them until 3 in the morning, so that at 3 in the morning they're saying, look, if I don't go to bed, my wife's going to divorce me. I'll put anything in the book that you want. I am no longer functioning as your editor. You have beaten me. You do that sort of thing because you think that every word that craps out of your mouth is great, is gold. That is the essence of condescension. I can spot it a mile off, and it infuriates me like a waving flag in front of a pawing bull. It infuriates me. That's the number one thing that makes a book bad for me. Does the author think he's all that and a slice of cheese? That drives me nuts. But also, is the book boring? The obverse of interesting, right? If the book is boring, even if the author is earnestly trying to convey something to me, boring is a silver bullet. It's awful. It's just awful. It takes a lot for me to like a book, despite the fact that it's boring. And then again, trailing way behind would be: is it poorly executed? Is it ineptly done? Does the author not know how to write? I'm willing to grant a lot if the author doesn't know how to write but does everything else right. I'm willing to allow a lot for that. But if the author doesn't care, or if I know for a fact that the author has committed one technical ineptitude after another and has been told that by qualified editors who also work for the publishing company that's paying them and have ignored it anyway and insisted that it be done wrong, that it be printed wrong, then that's going to make a book bad for me, and I would also argue just objectively bad. Question number 15 is, how do you feel about not finishing a book? I'm perfectly okay with it. It's a free country. I don't ever not finish books anymore. Every once in a while I have done that, but I don't really do it anymore. I don't see how I can justify it. I read really fast. I do nothing else anymore. I've cleared out everything else from my life. I don't do anything but read and take care of the bean. And also, I've had too many books surprise me in the final act and do something really interesting or really good. So I read right to the end, but I have no problem with people who DNF books. I have no problem with people who stop reading. I have only two problems with that procedure. One, as I've mentioned on this channel before, is that DNFing a book gives you a little rush, a little dopamine hit, and that is addictive. That itself is addictive. I have known people who started out thinking, I'm free. I'm not in school anymore. I can DNF any book that's not doing it for me. I'm just going to stop reading this book. I'm just going to toss it aside. And they like the rush of it. And that makes them all the more eager to do it with the next book, even if the next book really isn't completely displeasing them, until it becomes just a race to complete, rat in the cage addiction, where if a book doesn't blow you through the back wall of the theater in the first sentence, then you DNF it just for the rush. That's really bad. And anyone who's on the precipice of doing that should be patrolling their own behavior. That is really weak behavior. It's really weak as a reader to act that way. That's problem number one that I have with DNFing books, is that it can become an addiction on its own, in which case you're doing no service to the book and no service to the author or yourself. The other problem that I have with it is connected with an earlier question, which is that if you DNF a book, you have not read that book. Which you would think would go without saying, but apparently not. In the age of Blinkist and short form, apparently it doesn't go without saying. If you haven't read the book, then you haven't read the book. There is no such thing as a bail review of a book. There is no such thing as that. You cannot review a book you haven't read. You can tell people why you stopped, but that's not a review of the book. You don't know anything about the book. You didn't read it. So, but those are my only problems. Other than that, if you're not addicted to the process and you're not overclaiming what your DNF allows you to say about a book, then I agree completely with Brandon says in his own video. Life is too short to drag yourself dutifully through books that aren't doing anything at all for you. The thing to combat here, the thing I totally agree with about DNFing, is the weird grade school obligation that a lot of people feel, even into adulthood, that if they start a book, they're morally obligated to finish it. That is absolutely not true. Absolutely not true. If you feel that way, drilled into you because of school or whatever, you should get rid of that feeling, because you are wasting time, and that's not good. Reading should never be a chore, except if you're paid for it to be a chore, which we're going to be getting to. No, question number 16 is, should the author's personal life matter at all? And here I would like to draw a distinction between the author's personal life and their quasi-professional ex cathedra pronouncements. Where someone lives, who they live with, how they treat their children, that doesn't matter at all. I don't think that should matter one way or another at all. What they think about one subject or another on the political spectrum shouldn't matter at all. And it's always a little bit funny to me when the virtue signalers who say, well, they always say it publicly. They don't ever just make the private decision. They have to let people know. Well, I'm not going to support this author anymore because if I buy their book, I'm actually putting money in their pocket, and I don't agree with their opinion about some political subject where I think differently than they do. And imagine them having the gall to have an opinion different from my own on some subject on social media. First of all, I want to say, your $30 is not really going to make that much of a difference, and you know that. The thing that's so insidious, so evil about that stance, which is always public, I'm not going to support so-and-so anymore because he disagrees with me on this point of politics, of this opinion of mine. The thing that I hate about that is that the person who's saying that knows that them not buying one hardcover book from J.K. Rowling, who is the author that we're talking about when this subject comes up, we're not talking about anybody else, we're talking about J.K. Rowling, that $30 is not going to do anything to hurt that author or to send a message or to make things change. It's not going to do anything. And the person who says it knows it. They say it not because they want you to know they're engaging in a totally futile act, but because they want to coerce you, enough people, into doing it so that it does matter. That statement is always a call to action. And a squinty-eyed look to make sure that you know that the person notices who's also boycotting and who's not. It is, in other words, fascist. And therefore I hate it. Absolutely hate it. I've never met anyone who did that kind of well, I'm not going to give money to this author since I disagree with their political opinion. I've never met anyone who did that privately. They do it publicly because they want to bully other people, coerce other people into doing it, because they know perfectly well that it's going to take 20,000 people doing that to make any kind of a difference in the author. And what would that difference be? Well, you'll change your opinion now, won't you? Now that I have a cudgel over your head, you'll change your opinion. And that'll make me feel better. That'll make me feel better. That I and a bunch of other strangers I don't know but was able to successfully bully were able to browbeat you into changing your opinion. We know you don't mean it, but as long as you grovel in public, that's great. And we'll all cross our arms over our chest, and in one hand is the cudgel. How you go back to your parish, to your wonderful family and your warm Thanksgiving dinners and your wonderful glowing opinion of yourself, if that's your goal in life, I do not know. I do not know how you do that. It seems to me that if that is your goal in life, and it is, if you say, I'm not financially supporting this author, that is your goal. Your goal is never to withdraw just your $30. When you say that, your goal is to get 25,000 people to withdraw their $30, or you'll notice that they didn't. And the ultimate goal after that, which is to make the author who said an opinion that you don't agree with grovel in apology. If that's what you do, I don't see how you go home and hug your kids. I don't get it at all. As far as I'm concerned, the only thing that would affect a book would be if the author said an actual book-related thing. If someone writes a fantasy novel about children at a wizard school, I don't care at all what they think about Donald Trump or Nationalized Health Service or anything. I don't care what they think about anything. If that person goes on social media and says, well, yeah, I write these books, but I think my readers are morons for reading them. I have nothing but contempt for my readers. If they do that, and a couple of authors have, well, that's different, right? That isn't a question of me. That isn't an opinion on which I could possibly agree with the author. That's just an insult to me. If I know that an author feels that way, then that might change things. But otherwise, no. For a professional standpoint, the only thing that I want to know about an author that is ex cathedra, that isn't part of their book, is whether or not they have displayed incompetence in their subject somewhere else that's not in their book. And that never happens. Or virtually never. I can hardly think of a case where that was true. So, should the author's personal life matter at all? I say no. It shouldn't matter at all. And question number 17 is, if you could only read one genre for the rest of time, what would it be? And here, Brandon, oh my, oh my. This is the thing. The answer, his answer to this question was the thing that made most of you worried about me noticing this video, me responding to this video, because you were worried that I would go on the attack somehow, because he singles out philosophy, the most worthless genre ever invented by humankind, and says not only that he loves it, and that it would be the genre that he would read if he had to go only one genre, but that philosophy, as he puts it, covers everything. And out loud to the screen, I said, yeah, it covers everything, hip, deep, and crap. But he didn't mean it that way. Now, he's a big philosophy fan, as you know, because if you're the lucky winner for the giveaway up for this tag, you'll get a copy of Marcus Aurelius' Meditations. Needless to say, for me, it would not be philosophy. It would not be philosophy. As I said earlier in this tag, I have no interest whatsoever in sitting supplicant at the knees of a wise person who is going to give me little downdrafts from the mountain of their wisdom. I have no interest in that whatsoever. Uh, but but for me, it would be biography. I mentioned on this channel many times before, the biography is my favorite genre. It really does cover all. It really is all encompassing. And it's full of the kind of drama and human stakes that you can only get imperfectly aped in fiction. Biography gives you the real thing. And if the biographer is up to their art, it'll also be beautiful reading. It'll be totally engaging. This room that I'm in now, the room that I've returned to here, is almost wall-to-wall biography, and I want more. I want more. I want great biographies. There have been many years where it was only my professional obligation that stopped me from just saying, all right, well, for all of 2017, I'm just going to read biographies. Old ones, new ones, that's all. I'll get everything through that. I'll get science. I'll get philosophy even. I'll get military history. I'll get all of world history. I'll get social issues. I'll just read biographies and nothing else. I'll even get fiction. You get a ton of fiction, a ton of fiction analysis, a ton of fiction, of living in fictional worlds if you read author biographies. I have a ton of them. I've never done that. I don't think I ever will. I don't think that I could stand it. I think that I would worry too much about what I was missing. But for me, it would be biography if in a weird alternate world in which I picked that. Then number 18 is, do you ever read a book without knowing anything about it? I literally do this once every day. Every single day, without ever a day off, I do this. And I don't just read it, I then review it without knowing anything about it ahead of time. So I do this every day. I know just what it feels like. Number 19 is, what author, genre, series, or culture can you just not get into, and why? And here, awkwardly enough, my answer is going to be the dude bro culture. The culture of guys who want books to be video games. The culture of guys who are stimulating this part of their brain instead of this part of their brain. And want books as drugs. Want books as the next hit. Hey man, it's really good stuff, man. I'm not saying that Brandon is like this. I've zoomed in on the books on his bookshelf behind him in his videos, so I kind of think that he's not completely. His feet are on the wrong path, though. I should come over for an emergency Christmas visit, an emergency Christmas intervention. But no, it's dude bro lit. It's people who don't even sometimes seem to be aware that books can also be written by what's the word again? Women. much less books that require you. They're going after that dopamine hit of just a particular wavelength that they've realized will give them that little rush, because it doesn't feel like boring old reading. I always want to tell these people, these guys, I always want to tell them, the further you go down that path, the less capable you will be, the less able you will be mentally, neurologically, of reading Emma by Jane Austen, much less Middlemarch by George Eliot. The further down that path you go, the less able you will be to read those books, because they don't do that at all. And you will lose a lot by not being able to read those books, by picking up, I don't even know, The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope, or Look Homeward Angel, or Mrs. Dalloway. You are walking away from your ability to read books that are nuanced, that are subtle, that aren't giving you that dopamine hit every single time. The further you go towards Cormac McCarthy, the further away you go from anybody who's worth reading. So I would say I still read dude bro literature. It falls under my ambit. It's a lot of fiction, so I still read it. But it's the one culture that I am never going to see eye to eye with, because I know what it is. And it's not reading. Fundamentally, it's not reading. Fundamentally, it's sitting around a bong at night. And I think in almost every case where I have known the Dude Bro reader personally, it stems directly from that, literally. So I don't know how the young men who read this way don't see that. They're going to this for a particular kind of thing, and it's not really a reading thing. It's more of a, I don't know, mentality validation thing or something like that. I'm not criticizing Brandon here. I'm not criticizing Brandon. This is a terrific tag, but the tendency, the path to Dude Bro addiction is broad and inviting. So Frida and I might have to make an emergency Hanukkah intervention. Then the final question you'll be very relieved to hear. This is number 20 is, do you think everyone should read, and why? Nice, easy question to finish things out with. Yes, I think that everyone should read. And the point that I always make when questions like this come up, especially to a reading audience, is that no one does. We like to fool ourselves with that, but no one does. No one reads. Virtually no one reads. Virtually no one touches a book after they're forced to. Once their senior year in high school is over, they never even touch a book again. That was true even 40 years ago. It's all the more true now when you've got a phone to scroll through or an iPad to entertain you 24 hours a day. But sitting down and reading a book, there are plenty of people who have BookTube channels who wouldn't do that for all the tea in China. It's a very, very rare thing. So, of course, I think more people should do it because it broadens you. It deepens you. It textualizes you. You suddenly become more empathetic, less cloistered, less provincial, slower to instant judgment, more prone. If you read, you are perforce inhabiting the consciousnesses and worldviews of other people. And the whole definition of bigotry and isolation is that you don't do that. So reading does that. That's the definition of reading. So the more you do of it, of course, the better a world it would be. I think the better a world it would be. But it's always been a marginal thing, and it always will be. But anyway, that is the the philosophy of reading tag. Brandon's Bookshelf, terrific BookTube channel. I'll link to his channel down below. If you haven't go and subscribe because you're going to be getting really good content whenever he makes it. Sounds like he has a really busy life. It's amazing that we get content from it all. So go ye and subscribe. And, of course, do this tag. He says over and over again in his tag that he really wants to hear the answers that people come up with across the broad spectrum of the community that we have here. And I second that. I really want your answers to these questions. These are just fantastic. So it's a great congratulations to Brandon's Bookshelf for a great debut tag. And I'm going to wrap this up because 2 hours is my limit. Thank you, BookTube.